Hey, welcome back. So recently I've been playing with a new web framework called Salvo. In fact, Salvo claims to be the simplest web framework in the Rust ecosystem. So in this video, we're going to try and unpack that a little bit and see how true that really is. So what we're going to do is get started. We'll create some hello worlds. We'll do some routing with it. We'll serve some static files, such as a React application. We'll test out the performance of it, and we'll see if it's a really simple framework to get started with. And then we'll look at the pros and cons and whether you should be going forward with that web framework. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so first things first, you've probably never heard of Salvo before. So if we go to their website under salvo.rs, you can see that claim that I said in the beginning of the video that Salvo is the simplest web framework in the Rust world. In fact, it's got a pretty nice hello world, which we'll get started with in a second, and we'll get that hello world up and running. And as you can see, it does look fairly simple. There's not a lot of boilerplate going on, and you do have basic Rust knowledge, then yeah, I think you could probably get that up and running quite quickly, as we're going to prove in a second. Now, before we do that, what I want you to notice though is Salvo is based on both Hyper and Tokio. So if you've seen any of my previous videos, so if you've seen Actix-Web versus Rocket video, for example, you will probably noticed in that video, I talk about how both Actix-Web and Rocket are built upon Tokio, and Tokio is an asynchronous runtime, and that's really responsible for handling all the asynchronous TCP streams underneath the hood. So all of the major web frameworks in Rust are essentially running that underneath. And that's one of the really nice things about Rust, is actually it does take this ecosystem-based approach, right? So at the bottom layer, you've got Tokio doing all the TCP streams. And if you think of web servers are built on TCP IP. So that's really cool that that's using that. So that becomes your base level, right? You're never going to go faster than Tokio. So it's good that Salvo's built upon that. And then there's a kind of layer above there. So in this case, it's saying it uses Hyper. Now, I haven't done a video on Hyper. I will do a video on Hyper at some point. But if you haven't seen Hyper before, if you go to hyper.rs, it's from the Tokio ecosystem. And as you see, it's a fast HTTP implementation written in Rust, right? And there's a client library and there's a server library. So what Hyper is actually doing is it's handling all of the HTTP framework for you, request responses, that is all handled by Hyper. So that's pretty cool. And in fact, if we look at something like Rocket, then it is using Hyper underneath as well. So again, Salvo is building upon these layers. However, if we look at something like Actix-Web, it doesn't use Hyper, it's got its own implementation. So Salvo is sitting on a pretty good foundation, right? So what is Salvo actually doing then? So really what it's doing there is it's having that sort of simplified server layer, and it's going to handle things like the middleware, it's going to handle things like the routing, etc. But it's relying on Hyper and Tokio underneath that to perform all of the low-level web server functions. So as you can imagine, I am a fan of that approach. I like the idea of simplifying layers, but I also like the idea of using those great base level, low-level layers underneath it rather than trying to rewrite things. Okay, so now that we understand that, why don't we get Salvo installed and then write our first hello world program and see how easy it is to code against. Okay, so first things first, we've got an empty folder here, so there's nothing in that. And what we're going to do now is scaffold up a brand new Salvo web server. So we'll just type in cargo new hello underscore Salvo. And we want that to be a bin. And as you can see, that's created our hello Salvo application. So if I just cd into that, and you can see our application is there, and we'll just open that up in Visual Studio Code. So we'll do that by typing in code doc, and you can see it is created a very basic Rust application, which is just gonna return hello world just now. Okay, so first things first, I need to add Salvo as a dependency for my application. So to do that within my cargo toml file, I would just type in salvo equals, and then I would put in the current version. So to do that, if we go back to the Salvo website, and then if we click on docs, that'll take us to the Salvo docs, obviously, and then you can see there that the current version is 0.24.4. So if we come back into our dependencies and I type in 0, and you can see it's giving me 0.24 0.4 at the top there, so we'll just save that. And then we have now set that as our dependency. Second dependency that I'm going to need is, remember I said this was built on top of Tokio, so I need to add Tokio as a dependency as well, because I'm going to reference that within my application. So I'll just do Tokio equals, and then the current version for that is version 1. And then I'm just going to install all the features of Tokio. So we'll just put features full. If you want a deep dive of Tokio, then I do have a video on where we build an Echo client on a TCP stream and an Echo server. So if you want, go check that out. It will give a super deep dive into Tokio. I'm not going to go into that today because you don't really need to understand that to get started with Salvo. Okay, so now that my dependencies are installed, I will just check it all builds okay. So you can, if I just do a cargo build, it'll take a few seconds, but then it should come back and everything should be working okay. And as you can see, it's done that build, everything's fine. Actually, if I wanted to, I could do a cargo run as well. Remember, it's still the current hello world, so that's all working fine. I haven't broken my application in any way, shape, or form. So now that we've done that, let's write our hello world application. So we'll come back into Visual Studio Code. Okay, so to get started, first thing I need to do is I need to import all the preludes in for Salvo. So what we will do here is we'll just do a use Salvo, and then we will import the preludes. And that's going to make our life a little bit easier. So because underneath the hood, we're using Tokio as our asynchronous runtime, what we need to do is change our main function to be async. So we'll just type async here. So it's now going to be an asynchronous function of main. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to stick in the Tokio decorator here. So we'll have Tokio and main. And then therefore it's going to be using Tokio underneath the hood. So if you remember, Tokio is providing all of the asynchronous runtime and the asynchronous TCP streams. And then Hyper is performing all of the HTTP server capabilities. So on top of that, Salvo is performing all of the routing and simplifying some of the server startups. So to create a new router with Salvo, what we need to do is just type in let router equals a router new. And that's going to create our new router for us. And then what I want to do is route all GET requests to a new hello world handler, which we're going to create. So let's do that. So we'll just do a .get. And then we will pass in the name of our new handler. So the handler we will call hello world. And then we will create that in a second. So you can see it's got the red squigglies, cannot find hello world in this scope. So we need to create ourselves a brand new handler. So to do that, we need to specify that it's a handler. So we'll just do that. So a nice little macro there. And then async function hello world, which is the handler that is going to be called anytime we have a GET request coming into that router. And then we're just going to return a string there. So it's going to be a static string. And then all we will do is return hello world. Okay. And that is essentially how we set up routing. So it is super simple. It is literally instantiate a new router and then set the handler for it. It is really nothing more complicated than that. So now that we've got our router, what we need to do is then fire up our server. So to do that, we would just do server new, and then it's expecting a TCP listener. So remember, all of the TCP listeners and is being handled by Tokio. So we would just do TCP listener. And if we then just bind that to localhost, so we'll do 127.0.0.1, and I'm going to bind that to port 3000. And again, there's nothing special about this. This is really all of Tokio stuff. Again, if you check out my video on Tokio, you'll see that when you create TCP streams yourself, it's the exact same syntax that you're doing. Now, underneath the hood, obviously, Salvo with their server class is doing some nice implementations. It's taking away the complexity of setting up those servers, but that's really all that's happening. So once I've set up my server, all I need it to do is start serving content. And to do that, we need to pass in the router. Remember, I declared my router over here, so we'll just say router. And then we're going to block things from that point. So we'll just do it in a way. And then we are good to go. So if I now save that and we come back into our terminal, I will do a cargo run. And as you can see, our web server is now up and running. So if I open up Brave and then I type in localhost 3000, I'd expect to see hello world come back, which it does. So I've got a nice plain text hello world. Fair play to you, Salvo, right? This is actually a very, very simple web server, right? It's using Tokio, so Tokio is going to be super fast. It's also using Hyper underneath there. It's got a really nice, simple constructor here. So all it's doing is you're doing a TCP listener bind to 127.0.0.1.3.000. So that's what you would need to do anyway with Tokio. So this is standard Tokio stuff. So that's pretty cool. And then all you're doing is saying, go serve my content. So start serving up my service. And I'm going to do that by passing in the router. So, and obviously before that, I'm defining what my router is, and it's got some fairly simple handlers. So I actually, fair play to them. It is pretty simple. Okay, so that was actually quite easy. But before we go and have a play with some of the other features, let's just test the performance of that plain text for a second. So what we're going to do is we'll just create a production build of that. So we'll do cargo run -- release. So that will start a web server, but this time it will be a release build. And then what we're going to do is we'll run a very, very simple test against that, using WRK, which is a kind of load testing tool on my local machine. And then we'll see how fast that is. Now, we will do this in the exact same way as we did it in the Actix versus Rocket video that I did. So if you remember in that video, Rocket was running at around 150,000 requests per second on my machine. And Actix was running at something like 250,000 requests per second. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was around that sort of level. So we'll use WRK to do the test. We'll use 8 threads, 256 simultaneous connections, and we'll run a test for 30 seconds, and we'll hit our localhost 3000. So I'll just kick that test off just now. Alrighty, so as you can see, it came back and it's ran at around 260,000 requests per second. So that's there or thereabouts the same performance as Actix-Web. So it's pretty good performance. It's a lot faster than Rocket, but it's thereabouts the same as Actix-Web. And in fact, if you want to check out that video, there will be a link appearing in the top right-hand corner. So we know it's a pretty fast framework, and I'd expect it to be a fast framework because essentially it's just sitting on top of Tokio. So Tokio is providing most of the speed, and then you've got Hyper, which is acting as a super fast layer. And then really all Salvo is doing is making it nice and simple, and it's got this really awesome router handling mechanism, but beyond that, it's a very lightweight layer on top of Tokio. Actually, there's a really good point there, which is if you're thinking about building your own web server, and maybe you want to do that for whatever reason, you don't like the styling of Actix, you don't like Rocket, you don't like Salvo, I can understand that, but if you were going to do that, then as you can kind of see from Salvo there, then the starting point would be to build on top of Tokio and Hyper because it's super, super lightweight and it's very, very raw performance. Those frameworks are probably a little low level for most people. So that's why things like Actix and Salvo and Axum, etc. and Rocket all exist, because there's a lot of style differences, lots of things like middleware that you would want to use, and lots of people have different styles. But as you can kind of see from performance here, Salvo's running super fast, but why would you ever rewrite those lower layers? You're just not going to get that sort of level of performance. So anyway, that's good results. I'm actually quite impressed. So, there's nothing wrong from a performance perspective. So let's kind of play with the features and functionality a little bit more. So what we'll do is maybe serve up a static HTML file. As you probably know, I'm always looking for good web servers to replace things like Express, because I believe in this sort of hybrid world where things like Rust web servers will coexist with JavaScript. So, so let's see how easy this would be to fire up a HTML file. So let's come back into Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new folder called public, and that's where I'm going to host public static files. So in this case, I'm going to create a new hello files. So I'll call it index.html. So we'll create that. And then I'm just going to create a very basic HTML file. Okay, so I've now got my basic hello world HTML file, and what I now need to do is, in order to serve up static files, I just need to make a slight change to Salvo. So what I'm going to do here is I will just put some braces around here. I'm going to change that so it's version equals 0.24.4, and then I need to tell it which features I need. So in this case, I want the serve static feature. So we'll just add that in. We'll put serve static. And that will now give me the ability to serve static files. So what I'm going to do now is, rather than having my router serve up hello world whenever I hit localhost 3000, what I want to do is pass that off to the basically a static file handler. So what I'm going to do is just comment this lot out here. So I'll just toggle some comments, and then I'm going to comment this out as well, because I don't need that hello world handler anymore. So what we need to do now is create ourselves a brand new router. So we'll do that exactly like we did before by doing let router equals router new. But instead of passing get this time, what we're going to do is we're going to use the push method. And what push is allowing us to do, as you can see there, is push a router as a child of a current router. So what it's essentially allowing us to do is chain routing together, right? So we can chain all of these routing requests together. And that's going to be super powerful and easy. So what it's expecting underneath there is, as you can see, it wants a router, which is a child of the current router. So I'm just going to do another router new. And then this time, what I can do is set the path. So that, this allows me to set my filtering. So in this case, I'm just going to take the default top level path there. So I'll do passing an empty string. And then what I want that to do is handle the get request. So of course, you've got get, you've got post, you've got all the various methods there. But in this case, I'm wanting to handle get. And then what I want to do is use this new file handler that we brought in there. Now you can see it's giving me an option there to use Salvo extra serve static. So this is the dependency, the feature that I just added in my Salvo dependency. So if I just do that, so as you can see at the top there, it's added in extra serve static file handler to the top. So we're in a good position here. And now what I need to do is I need a new file handler, obviously. And then what I want to do is I want to basically take that incoming path. So if it's localhost 3000, what I want to do is serve up what's in the public index.html. So I'll just type in public index.html. We will save that. We'll just close this off, and we now should have a working Salvo server. So if I come back to my terminal, and if we just restart my server, so we'll do a cargo, we won't do a release build this time, we'll just do a cargo run. And as you can see, our web server is now running. And then if I come back to localhost 3000, we should see that brand new HTML page that we've got. So if I do developer tools, you see hello world coming there, which is good. And then if I look at the elements, you can see there's my head, there's my hello world. So it's serving up those static files pretty well. Obviously, because I've only handled localhost 3000, if I was to type in index.html, I get a 404 because it doesn't know, it's a file not found, it doesn't know what to do with that. So if I want to extend my routing to handle the index.html, what I could do is just add another routing path onto that. And the simpler way of doing this is actually, because it's chained routing, I can just add a router and a router. Remember, I could add children to this at any point. All I really want to do is underneath this router here, where I'm pushing in this router, is all I really want to do is push in another router again. So that's pretty simple. All I really need to do here is just copy this dot push here, and then I can chain it on to the end. And rather than setting the path to blank, I can set it to index.html, and we can save that. And then I can clear this, do another cargo run. It'll take a second to build, and then Hello Salvo is up and running. Now, if I do a localhost 3000, that is working as it did before. But remember, my index.html wasn't working. But if I hit return now, you can see it's working. It's returning hello world. So it's really easy to add in new paths whenever you want. All I'm going to do is just chain them together. Just go push, 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 push. Now, obviously, that is going to be a bit of a pain, that if I've got to add each file individually, then I don't want to keep adding this over and over again. So what I want to be able to do is serve up anything that is in that public folder. So what we'll do here is we'll just create a new file called index2.html, and we'll say hello world 2. And then what we will do now is refactor this slightly so that we can serve up anything that's in that public folder. So the way we are going to do that is we're going to change this router here so that rather than serving up files, it's going to serve up whatever is in a directory. So to do that, we will change that from being a file handler to a dir handler, okay? So it's fairly obvious what that means. So in this case, from a dir handler perspective, it's going to serve up as a handler. It's just going to serve up whatever's in the directory that we specify. So in this case, we're specifying public. So it's going to serve up whatever is in that public folder. So now that it's doing that, what we want to do is change the path. So instead of serving up index.html, what we want to do is serve up whatever is in that folder. So the way to do that, what we will do is, rather than doing the / what we'll do is anything under the public folder. So if you type in / public, then anything after that will be served up. So to do that, we'll just have public, and then we will set a nice little syntax here, which is some angle brackets star path. And that's basically what that's saying is, if you type in public and then whatever comes after that / is just going to map directly into the public folder. And as you can see now, there's a little squiggly because we've got use of an undeclared type dir handler. So we'll just quick fix that. We'll import that, and you can see dir handler is now added to our imports at the top there. So we'll save that. And then if we come back into our terminal, we'll just clear this. We'll do a cargo run. Our application's running again. Okay, so let's open up a fresh tab, and we'll go to localhost 3000. It's serving up hello world. Now let's try index.html again. We've got a 404 because we're only serving up whenever we've got the word public in front. So we'll get rid of public. And now what we'll do is do public index.html, and you can see it's coming back with hello world. And now if I change that to index2, it says hello world 2. So that is now allowing us to do that static handling. Now that's pretty simple stuff. But actually what I could do if I wanted to is I could bring my hello world back. So let me just untoggle these comments as well. And we'll chain that back in so that whenever you do path hello, then we want to use that handler over here. So let's do that. We will just copy this in here, do Control C, we'll Control V in here. And then this time we'll have the path set to hello. So that's going to do the routing. We don't want to serve from the public folder. What we want to do is get back to using that hello world. So we'll get rid of all of this. And now we will type in hello underscore world. We'll save that. And then if we kill this and we do another cargo run, our application's back up and running. Index 2 is still working. Index 21 is obviously not working because that doesn't exist. Index.html works. We can get rid of the public, go back to localhost 3000. That works there. But now if we put in hello, you can see it's back to hello world serving up as plain text. So it's a pretty powerful method. It is actually really easy to just start chaining things together. I can just add more paths whenever I want. I can use file handlers. I can use directory handlers. I can create my own custom handlers, and it's pretty simple just to chain that together on the routing. So actually, I think that is actually pretty simple. That's not the only use within the routing. I can actually even do some cool things as well. So I can use little bits of middleware and extensions to do some cool things. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm just going to add in .hoop, and what that allows me to do, so it's a piece of middleware that allows me to add some cool stuff. So in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to add some compression in. So what I'm going to say in this case is I want to use brotli compression for this top level requests. So to do that, I'll just do compression, and then we'll put brotli. So we'll save that. I'm gonna get failed, use of undeclared. Okay, so we'll just add extra compression to the top here. And then I'm gonna get another squiggly when I hit save, because as you can see, no compression in the root. So I'm just gonna come back into my cargo toml. I'm gonna add compression as a feature. Save that. And then if we come back into my main.rs, I can't spell compression either. And you can see that should now work. So if I come back here, restart my server, cargo run. If I open up my tab quickly and do a localhost 3000, you can see it's coming back with hello world. But if I bring up my developer tools here and then just do a refresh on the network tab, open this up, scroll down a little bit here, you can see content encoding BR. So it's using brotli as the encoding type. But if I were to go to index.html, I need to put my public here first, obviously. And then look at that there, you can see there is no brotli in the content type there because I've not enabled that piece of middleware. So that is pretty powerful actually. So it's really easy to add in some middleware within my routing. And as you can see, I'm using the out of the box compression piece of middleware, but of course you can create your own custom middleware, etc. to do that. So I think that's pretty cool, and that's pretty fast. Yeah, and then finally, if I wanted to, I could even put a React application within there as well. I'm going to do this the kind of cheaty way. We'll come up a level, and then what we'll do is do a create React app. Hello world. That'll take a few seconds. Okay, so now that my app's created, if I just go into cd hello world and I do an npm start, you will see my React application will be starting within my Express server, localhost 3000. That's fine, that works. So what I will do now is I'll just do let's kill that. We'll do a npm run build. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take that build folder and I'm gonna copy that into Salvo, and then we're going to serve that up from Salvo. So to do that, I'm just going to do open dot, which opens up my Finder window. I'm going to take this build folder as a whole. I'm going to bring this into Salvo. I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to rename it to, let's just call it SPA for just now. So we'll just do rename SPA. And now what I'm going to do is come back into, we'll close that down, and we'll just come back into Visual Studio Code. And then what we'll do now, in the same way as we're serving up this public folder, what we will do is serve up SPA. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the router that we use for public, because it's very similar to what we're going to do here. And then I'm just going to replace our top level, because what I want to do is serve it up on localhost 3000. So we'll just paste this in. And then rather than serving up public path, what we will do is just do anything from localhost 3000 onwards. And then what we will do is serve up from SPA. So if we save that now, that should mean when we go to localhost 3000, it should be serving up from the SPA folder. So let me just come back to this tab. We will do a cargo run. Our application's back up and running. we'll open up Brave. And if we go to localhost 3000, you see 404 not found because I've not called any file. But if I call index.html, there is our React application. So Salvo is quite capable of serving up static files, serving up React applications, etc. Now, of course, if I wanted to put that deeper down, I would need to change all my build and all my relative paths, etc. I'm not doing that today. I'm just pushing that in. But as you can kind of see, it is pretty simple to get a React application running within Salvo. So I think the trick to this with Salvo is this routing mechanism is really simple. The ability to create new handlers is really simple. We can kind of push things around. You know what? I do think it is a pretty simple web server framework. I like the fact that it's built on Tokio. I like the fact that it's built on top of Hyper. I like the fact that what they call the chainable tree routing system, I think that is great, actually. I think it's so easy to chain together your routes. I really like it, actually. It's nice and fast. It's pretty simple. I mean, we covered gets, we covered static files, etc. You know, but you can see you can handle posts and deletes, and you can pass in the paths using the with path, etc. So it's really easy to just get things started and then just chain things together. So I kind of like that. We covered serving static files. We covered the support for middleware, so it's really easy to take existing middlewares, plug them in, create your own. We showed that with the kind of brotli example, and then of course they're saying they've got support for WebSocket as well. So all of that I really like. So I do like it as a framework. It's fast, it's clean. What's the kind of negatives with this? I guess from my perspective, there is a few negatives. Probably the first one is how supported is it? I don't know, right? I mean, there's a couple of contributors, there's maybe 6 contributors. It's really sort of mainly pushed by this Chris Learn guy, which is cool. Would I risk that for a production system? Would I deploy it? I don't know, right? Because I don't know how much they're going to be committed to that project. It's a small maintainer base. So that would be sort of a negative from my perspective, you know, but I have to say I do like the framework. So maybe in these cases, I would probably, if I wanted a simpler framework to use, I'd maybe lean more towards something like Axum, which is supported by the Tokio team, etc. It's got a larger contributor base. It's just as fast. It's quite neat as well. So maybe we'll cover that in a separate video. But honestly, great job. Salvo is fantastic. I don't have a lot of things to complain about. I think it's really nicely done. It's super fast to get up and running. I'm just not sure if I would use it in a production scenario because I just don't know what the support is going to be like going forward. But this is a really nice example of building something simple for a purpose and building on top of an existing ecosystem, and I really like the way that that's been approached. So great job. Will I continue to use Salvo? Probably, because it's really fast and nice to just create web servers and do stuff with it. So I'll probably continue to use that. But again, maybe for other scenarios, I'd probably lean more into something like Axum. But we'll cover that in another video. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been useful. And if you want to go and check out Salvo, certainly do that. It's a great framework. I certainly enjoy it. And I'll catch you in the next video.